Hey everyone, welcome to Detoxicity, a show about progressive masculinity. My name is Mike Joseph, and I thank you for listening. Hopefully you enjoy what you hear. If you do, I humbly ask that you leave us a rating or a comment on whichever platform you are using to listen. Additionally, feel free to subscribe and follow me on social media. DetoxPod Guy on Instagram and Tiz Mike Joseph on Twitter. If you'd like to offer feedback, suggest a guest, or be a guest yourself, reach out to me on socials or via email, detoxpod@gmail.com. Enjoy the episode. I also want to take this opportunity to wish a happy Pride Month to all of the folks out there who identify as LGBTQIA+. Tanner Hinds is a comic and musician based in Cincinnati, Ohio. Tanner also hosts and produces the Heavy Head Podcast, an episodic podcast that takes a hard look at various mental health diagnoses. Tanner and I share a wide-ranging conversation that involves dealing with depression, the act of self-care, having supportive family and friends, and living life as an openly bisexual man. Check out what me and Tanner talked about. I think you'll enjoy this podcast.
Hey, my name is Tanner Hinds. I am a comedian, musician, and podcast creator based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. I am a stand-up comedian. I am the frontman and guitarist and singer of a rock and roll band called Real Blue Heartache Kids. And then I also am the creator of the scripted podcast about mental illness called Heavy Head Podcast.
That's a lot of stuff, man.
That's a lot of stuff, yeah. I'm not a one-trick pony, I don't think so. I like to do a bunch of different shit. So I find that's my happiest when I'm creating stuff. So I create a lot.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I guess starting with the music and the comedy stuff, like how did you decide that you wanted to be a musician or a comedian?
The music started first. I took lessons as a teenager, guitar, piano, got semi-proficient at those, and then just when I turned 18, I got my first drum set, and that's really what was my focus for a lot of years. I was a drummer in some bands in college, and then I started working at the studio here in Newport, Kentucky, which is right across the river from Cincinnati. And one of the perks is they let you, I can use the space for free. So I was like, I've been writing songs. I might as well finish these songs that I have and then record them because I can do it for free. And, that studio project turned into, Real Blue Heartache Kids, which is now a live band for the first time, which is exciting. So just the desire to want to keep myself involved in music, particularly, especially on the production side. And then just comedy just started on a whim. I was a big comedy fan. George Carlin Pryor were like my 1 and 2. I was flipping through channels one day. I saw my parents had HBO, which was very amazing for a teenage kid in the suburbs. I just saw this old man on stage, like just saying these like most bizarre shit, and it was George Carlin doing his second to last HBO special. And I was like, what the fuck? I didn't even know what comedy was. I just saw this weird old guy saying this weird shit, and and then I Cincinnati is a good comedy scene, lots of opportunities, lots of mics, lots of clubs. Get the ball rolling, and so I just tried it one night just on a whim, and it beginner's luck, I did pretty well my first time, got some laughs, and just kept going. And it's been almost 7 years since I started, so that's kind of my path.
That's whenever I talk to comedians, and for some reason I feel this way about comedy more than I do about people who are musicians. Like, to get on it's one thing to be like, okay, hey, I'm funny. It's another thing to be like, hey, I'm funny and I'm gonna get on a stage and try to make people laugh. Like,
yeah.
Do you ever like freak out when you have to get on stage and do you feel pressure?
Yeah, I used to. I mean, it's hard to say right now because I haven't really performed. I'm starting to get back into comedy this month. I did some outside shows, last year. We did outside stuff, which felt safe and good. So I did pretty well after a couple months off. I've done Zoom shows, which I don't recommend ever doing. But yeah, in the beginning, I used to freak out. There were 2 or 3 times I remember particularly, I was on stage. I had people ready to see me, and I get on stage, and I just like, oh fuck, I can't do this. Sorry, and then I just walk off stage, and it's like the worst feeling ever. But that doesn't really happen much usually. There's always nerves just because, being what it is, putting yourself out there like that. But the freakouts don't happen really anymore. But yeah, that did happen in the beginning. So. Just trying to get my bearings of what the fuck am I doing up here?
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, so now on to the podcast, which is a pretty, it's called the Heavy Head Podcast, and it is a very heavy podcast.
Yeah.
What was it that made you decide? It's much needed, by the way. You're doing a great thing, but what was it that made you decide you wanted to do a podcast and specifically spotlight mental illness?
Being that the creative person, at some point that means eventually having your own podcast, which I'm sure you understand.
That's the way things go nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a podcast, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing?
I started one where it's just kind of like what you do, when it's just I talk, interview other people. But I always try to do it. I try to do things differently. Try to come up with new ways of doing things. So I know I didn't want to go the interview route. I wanted to do something more involved, more creative. And then my friends were trying to pitch the show to a couple of different networks, like old country, like Western, like hayride sort of show.
Okay.
Trying to do that, and I helped them out with that. Like, this is kind of a scripted thing, because that's different. And then being a lifelong sufferer of mental illness, I was like, well, that's kind of like my wheelhouse, I guess, so to speak. And so I got to a point in my treatment where I felt good enough to where I felt, how can I start giving back to the community? And so that happened. Those are like kind of like two worlds colliding. Seeing like my friends try to do this show, I thought maybe I can do that sort of same thing with the talk about mental illness. And that's kind of where the seed of it all started, 2 or 3 years ago. So, yeah.
And this goes back, I guess, to the theme of really kind of putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever listen to an episode and think back and like, holy shit, did I really say all that stuff, or write that and put it into the world so that now the public has this like information about me?
Yeah, in all my creative endeavors, I get personal. So this one in particular is super deep. So yeah, that happens a lot, but that's kind of the idea. When I'm working on something, if it makes me feel uncomfortable, then that's kind of a guide, like, okay, I'm on the right spot. I'm on the right track. So I try to go even deeper. So yeah, any episode I could pick out 4 or 5 things. Like, that made me uncomfortable. But I think that's what makes it real. And I think that's to me, that's the only thing I'm interested in as an artist, is trying to find what's real out there. And so that's sort of my guide. So yes, there's lots of things about that project that made me uncomfortable, but I think that's sort of the idea. That's how I want to pursue things.
Where'd that come from? Because I feel like one theory that I have is that when something makes people uncomfortable, they don't run towards it, they run away from it. It's really easy a lot of times to go the road most traveled, and
right.
Things that make people uncomfortable are generally things that people shy away from. What is it about you and your experience that makes you confront the difficult topics that you confront?
It's a good question. I've spent most of my life in an uncomfortable place, so I guess I'm sort of used to that. And a lot of just my favorite artists, the people that I enjoy, that's sort of what they do too, is they go after the truth in whatever medium they choose to write about. That's what hits home with me. So I want to be able to do what they do. Even with treating mental illness, the way out is through. So you have to confront it. So I carry that ideal into my everyday life. That's what helps me get through my illness. So just confronting that and having that be sort of how I go about things is how I want to live my life. So
that's pretty damn admirable. So you said just a minute ago that you've always kind of had this feeling of being uncomfortable or discomfort.
Yeah.
Can you pinpoint like when that started, or even like what the cause of it was? Causes, because I guess there doesn't necessarily need to be just one.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something I was thinking about recently. My whole life, I never really felt like I really belonged anywhere, or that I'm not really like most other people. I'm not saying that makes you better or worse. I just feel like my ideals, the things that I enjoy, the way my brain works, like I can't be how, maybe I'm just perceiving that wrong, but I can't be how most other people kind of live their lives. Even today, there's very few places, count on one hand the number of places I truly feel comfortable existing in or just being at. Always feeling like an outsider, to my life. I can trace that back to just being a little kid, playing pickleball by myself in the backyard because no one else would play with me. So, and just sort of going alone. Not that I don't have people in my life that I love and care about and enjoy hanging out with, but that's sort of, been ingrained in me from the beginning. And that was no one's fault. No one taught me that. That's just sort of how I sort of rolled.
It's very, I feel, uncommon to speak to people who, as kids, felt like they were cool being alone, and it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, or oh, why don't people like me, that sort of thing. But it sounds like you were kind of okay to an extent with being a little different.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020. Looking back on that now, it's not that I don't clamor for attention or need to be around other people. Looking back on it now, I wasn't sad that I was alone, but I do wish I had more companionship as a child. So yeah, I do strive for companionship. It's just been alone is sometimes easier, even if it hurts, I guess. So it hurts
Right.
alone, but I wasn't sad about that. Now, yeah, I wish I had more companionship, even to this day. But I don't think of those times as particularly sad. It's just how it was, and
Right.
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, now I have two questions in my head. So the first question is, as a guy, as a male, as a man, what was your socialization like? Like, what were you initially taught about what a guy is or what a guy is supposed to be?
Probably just the media I consumed as a kid. My parents weren't one to sit us down and teach us lessons, life lessons. They just sort of showed us by example through how they lived their life in their relationship. I was lucky to have parents who were together and married, still are, still very happy. So we're a very nuclear family, which is great, but they never wanted to sit us down and be like, hey, this is how a man acts, this is how a woman acts, this is how you should act in your life. So I think it was just the media portrayal of how that is, which is probably not the best way to learn how a man acts or a woman or just a person going through society. We never got those hard lessons. They taught by example, and they led a great example.
Was there ever any conflict? Like, these are the messages I'm getting, but this doesn't feel like what I am?
Yeah, a lot of that can go back to sexuality. I was always attracted to women, but there's always something felt conflicted inside me. So I think it was like an inner confliction of potentially having attraction to men, which didn't sit right with me and probably doesn't sit right with most teenage boys. So just trying to push that away, push it down, and not even acknowledge it, and definitely not act on it. So just in the hopes that if I hold it down long enough, it will die and that won't be a thing. But that's not the case. So usually just comes back 10 times stronger. So
Yeah, I feel like it
yeah,
kind of goes the opposite way.
yeah. The harder you try not to let something happen, the more it comes out. So that was sort of the inner conflict, and just not even having a name for that feeling or that desire or whatever the fuck that is inside
Right.
me. No one taught me what gay was or bi or straight or transgender. There's definitely not in school in the 2 days that we spent on sex ed.
Which is so crazy. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you spend more time on the Louisiana Purchase than you do on things like social skills or sex education or
Identifying feelings that you have inside yourself.
Yeah.
So, same with depression. How much easier would it have been if I had a good education on mental illness and I had to learn it all through experience on my own? How much easier would my life have been had I was taught this and given proper instruction instead of just Googling everything? How do I not be gay, Google?
Which I'm sure a lot of people who are queer or gay or bi or trans have done at some point in the Google age, have been like, how can I not be like, I've probably typed that into Google at some point.
Oh yeah, I know, and I don't mean any offense by that. That's just something that I did.
Yeah.
Not having access to answers as a kid when you're feeling these things is totally frustrating. And we live in the world with we have this access to answers at our fingertips, but just the conversations around it, just at least 10, 15 years ago weren't happening. I think it's getting better now, but yeah.
Bit by bit.
Yeah.
So flipping back to the mental health stuff, how did the depression thing, was it something that you always kind of had an idea about, or was it something where you were like, oh, I'm feeling a certain way, I don't know exactly what's going on, but let me do some research? Or did someone pull you aside like, hey, Tanner, maybe something's wrong? How did that manifest itself?
There were a couple of things. If you would just ask me, I would have told you it started, when I was a teenager, 15, 16. The usual symptoms: crying myself to sleep, just feeling sad all the time, But remember those old like Prozac commercials? Like it was like, oh, this is a cloudy day, and if you're cloudy, just raining on top of you. Like, and then my mom told me this. I don't remember this. But she said one of those commercials played when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and commercial got over, and she's like, and I turned around like, hey, that's me, and for the life of me, I can't remember this, but she swears up and down that this happened, as an 8, 9, 10-year-old. And also around this time, again, having, the access to HBO, there was it's kind of fucked up. There's this documentary about this little kid. It was all like home video stuff. I can't remember the name of it. But eventually, at the end of the documentary, he kills himself. And he's just saying all these feelings I had, leading up to that. And I was like, oh, I sort of identified with that as like, oh, that's me. Not that that's my path, but I know what that feels like. But it was still 4, 5, 6 years before that before I noticed symptoms, and just talking to friends, and then eventually getting to the point like, hey, I can't help you anymore. You should probably get some professional help, and not getting, and then therapy happened after that, a couple years after that. I think it goes back farther than that. Even just, the decision to play wiffle ball by yourself, I think speaks volumes to, at least in my case, maybe there's something deeper going on. So
when you were a kid, did you have an idea of what your depression was related to, or was it not situational, just more, I guess, kind of like chemical?
There's a bunch of things. Genetically, my family have a family history of depression, all kinds of mental health conditions, depression, all that stuff. So I think there's a genetic factor. Environmentally, I had no reason to be depressed. My parents were together. They loved each other. They provided for us. I had friends. Not that any of that actually matters at the end of the day, because you're depressed, you're depressed. I think sexuality had a lot to do with it, even if I wasn't recognizing it or calling it by that name at that time. Even today, I still downplay the role of my sexuality and my mental illness. I don't know why, I just do. It does have a huge effect on me. Anything that makes you different is cause for concern and feeling bad about yourself. So it had to be a huge impact, even if I didn't recognize it at the time, and still does. So
absolutely,
there's a lot of things going on.
What was there a breaking point, or were you just kind of like, okay, with the help of my friends, I'm gonna call a therapist and kind of figure out what's happening here?
Well, I wanted to tell my parents for a long time, and having real conversations with your parents is always a fear. At least for me, it was.
I think it is for a lot of people. I can relate to that.
Yeah, but eventually it got to a point. I was in high school my senior year, and I did the most high school kid thing ever. I texted my parents. I was like out of the house, away, and then I texted them, hey, I think I'm depressed. And I knew if I was out of the house, there would be like less of a chance of like, I don't think they were going to yell me or anything, but I didn't want them to get upset. And I came home and talked about it. And the next day I went to the doctor, put me on the medication, and gave me a list of therapist names. And, that was 12 years ago. And here we are. It's been quite the journey. Yeah. Yeah.
And ongoing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. One misconception I think a lot of people have about, well, two misconceptions people gather from the experience that you and I go through, is one, that therapy immediately cures everything, which it doesn't in most cases. It has to be like a long-term concerted effort. And the other thing is that meds cure everything immediately, which, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been on 12 or 13 different medications.
Yeah, I've been on about 16 to 18 is my number. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of trial and error and a lot of patience.
So I'm in therapy and medication, and really sometimes those things make your depression worse because you have to confront those emotions for the first time, especially therapy. Medications, it can be a train wreck, trial and error, and getting on new medications and withdrawal and all that shit.
Oh, yeah.
But even like in the short term, therapy can make things worse because you have to finally confront yourself for the first time, and you never had to do that. And sometimes what you see is very ugly, and you don't like that version of yourself, so you have to work through that. Eventually you stick with it. Persistence in my case was got me on the right track. In the short term, it can make a messy situation even worse. I just help you gotta stick with it. Eventually you will find something that works for you. So
right. And also beyond the meds, finding a good therapist sometimes can be a lot of or not a good therapist. That's not the terminology I want to use. Finding a therapist that you have the right chemistry with.
Right. everything I read and been talked about is that's the number one key to feeling better is find a therapist that you can connect with. And just people always ask me, like, how do I know if my therapist is right? And that's hard to answer. I think it's, in my case, it was a gut thing. I just knew, like, oh, this is my person I can connect with. And yeah, you just gotta keep trying and don't be afraid to. It's always like, oh, okay, well, this isn't working, I'm gonna find someone else. But if they're a good therapist, they encourage you to find the right person. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I've often compared it to dating, where it's
Yeah.
like the first person you meet on a date isn't usually the person you're going to end up spending a significant amount of time with.
Right.
If you're really looking for somebody that's going to be cool to hang out with, you might have to go through a few people. And it's the same thing with the therapist, I think. If you want to find somebody you really click with, sometimes you do get lucky and it's the first person you have a meeting with. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's the fourth person, the fifth person. Sometimes it's the fifth person, and then at some point you go back to the second person. Like it's different for each person that goes through it.
Yeah, I got pretty lucky. Took me 2 tries to get the right therapist, and I got a whole psychiatrist. But just having access to treatment is the other biggest barrier. It's hard to find good treatment, hard to find something that's cost effective. It can be tough, but finding the right person it's like dating. Oh yeah, this is my person.
Right.
Hopefully they don't cheat on me.
Well, therapists got to make money, so you unfortunately have to be in a polyamorous relationship with your therapist.
Yeah.
So because you're cognizant of all this stuff now, do you ever feel like talking about it as much as you do can sometimes make you feel worse? Or is it always like therapeutic to talk about this stuff?
It's mostly therapeutic. I've also, this year I've been lucky enough, I don't know if you know the organization, NAMI. They have chapters all over the country. They're nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. And they have volunteers. People who live with mental illness come and volunteer speaking. So I do a couple of programs with them. One where we go into schools, all virtually now, and teach kids about mental health conditions, things to look for, and to help themselves and other people. And I just started doing that this year. I do a couple other programs with them, but just volunteering with them and sharing my story and actually seeing kids react to it in a positive way feels like I'm actually doing something to make a difference, make a change. And that's very therapeutic for me. It's been an awesome experience because then, like, if a joke bombs or I write a shitty song, whatever, but to actually see I'm helping someone who was in my position to make their life a little bit easier, that's been the best thing for me. So yeah, that helps a lot. What I've been doing with the podcast is a little more involved, so it's a little more taxing just because to do it the way I want to, I had to be really super involved, and it's a super heavy, dark subject, so that can be exhausting. So to make sure I give myself enough self-care, but yeah, every encouraging message just makes me want to keep going. So yeah,
it's an awesome feeling. I say this from my own experience, to know that talking about, I mean, you and I, what we have in common is that we talk about mental illness and we talk about sexuality. Mm-hmm. And those are two things that are still such taboo topics to discuss. I feel like when somebody talks about them openly, it gives other people license to actually feel what they feel. And that's a really good feeling, to be like, oh, this person now sees themselves in me or sees themselves in you. And maybe because we're out here exposing the stuff that we go through, we can really help people kind of live their fullest lives. Or if they have like a mental health issue, they now know that it's okay to get help.
And just the responsibility of that, I think, is great too, because it puts, not having family, not having kids or marital partner, that the responsibility of being an advocate and continuing on that journey, I think is really important for me. So just to keep going, because it's not like you're open once and then it's simple, easy to talk about. You have to keep being courageous, and I keep having to pump myself up. If it's just like one time, okay, I'm good, I can talk about whatever, but I feel like I had to keep giving myself the courage to keep doing the things I'm doing, just because it is such a sensitive topic and I'm choosing a harder path. But at the end of the day, I think it's worth it.
It is. It's absolutely rewarding. And for me, it's like, by just being who I am, I could potentially make other people's lives better. So maybe by talking to people, maybe they won't have to go through some of the self-doubt and that kind of bullshit that I went through, and they'll have an easier road. And it's kind of also the whole like pay it forward thing. Hey, if I help somebody, maybe they'll help somebody, and they'll help somebody, and it'll turn into this big circle of people kind of doing nice things for each other.
Yeah, I mean that's why I started doing what I'm doing, is because I feel so fortunate and privileged to be able to get through all the shit I've got through and be in a position where I feel like I can give back. And as this is me saying thank you for all the help that I've gotten throughout the years, which is a lot. So yeah, I owe that now to I don't know, the world, I guess. And just remember that as hard as my life was, it was relatively easy compared to a lot of people. Just keep paying it forward. And so that's how I think of it, mindset.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like people maybe treat you differently because you're so open about your experience?
That's a good question. I never thought of that. I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't know how to answer that. That's a good question. Never thought of that.
You don't have to answer it.
I try not to think about how other people perceive me anymore, which is
That's
easier said than done.
yeah.
I'm very bad at it, but I'm trying, especially post pandemic. You know, how do I want to live my life? What's holding me back from doing what I really want to do, and just trying not to care about what people think. But you still do, because we're human, and that's how we're wired, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Lately, over the past like 2 years, there have been a lot of comics like Gary Gulman, Chris Gethard, a lot of folks that really talk about mental health and kind of fold it into a comedy space. And it's hard and not hard to make stuff like that funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you is that stuff that you fold into the comedy that you do? And if so, like how do you get laughs out of people when you're talking about something that's so serious?
Yeah, I do. Same sort of ideal, go for what's real in my writing, and that's real. And so I do it, to varying degrees of success. So mental illness, I have very good material about sexuality. A lot of it is up to the audience, and some minds are like, oh, this is awesome. Others are like, I don't want to hear another word of this. So sometimes it's just, oh, it's just a bad audience. But again, just work on my craft until I get to a point, again, where I feel uncomfortable. Like, this is uncomfortable to talk about. Again, that's my true north. Okay, I'm on the right path because this is making me uncomfortable, and just trying to be real. But it's a fine line, and most people don't want to hear about that, and they just want a simple laugh. So it's constant trial and error.
It's also got to be a lot more difficult in Cincinnati than it is in New York, where I don't know,
Yeah.
I think at my age and with the people that I hang out with now, it's no big deal to talk about mental health. The sexuality can be tricky sometimes, but even with that, New York City has so much of everything that you can kind of find. You're always going to be able to find people who are like, well, we don't care, but you're in an environment that's smaller and probably a bit less immediately open-minded.
Yeah, it's funny. At least I had much bookings post-COVID. Pre-COVID, the only places that would book me consistently were small towns or places where it's probably not the best idea to talk about mental health. Okay, but sexuality definitely don't do. So I was like, okay, I have this much material that's nothing gay,
Right.
but when I'm playing like the podunk towns, but it's like I want to be able to do whatever I want to do wherever I'm at, which it should be anybody's goal, but you can't just do that, unfortunately. So it's frustrating. But I think just moving forward, especially having a year of your life taken away, it's like I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to handcuff myself just because some people might have hurt feelings. Whether I do that is for another day, but that's how I want to feel moving forward. I can just do whatever I want. Like, I might be dead tomorrow, so I might as well do what I want right now. Again, whether or not I do that remains to be seen, but that's how I feel.
It's a process.
Yeah. People are like, oh, Dave Chappelle can do whatever he wants. Yeah, he's at that level, but not that I'm anywhere near Dave Chappelle. I could be dead in a week. I didn't tell someone to fuck off. I didn't tell a joke that I wanted to tell because I'm playing to a bunch of well, why would I want to do that anymore after
Life is short.
Yeah.
You gotta take advantage of the opportunities you have while you have them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What has been? I feel like I'm just firing off questions. What has been the hardest thing in terms of being a bisexual guy to come to terms with? or have you like come to terms with it? Like, are you at a stage where you're cool with it? What's that journey been like?
It's been mostly frustrating, I guess. To be honest, you feel like you have to exist in sort of two worlds, and you're not really comfortable in either one. But this is what it is. So having straddled, those two hemispheres, it's difficult. I guess I accept it. I know this is a bit just because I accept it doesn't mean I'm comfortable with it
Sure.
particularly yet. So I'm still on that journey. And what does it mean to be a bisexual man? What does that look like? You know, what's the archetype for that? What does that mean for me? It's difficult. It's hard, and then having to explain it to other people. Do these people just think I'm just gay? Do they think I'm what? Like I don't. Again, going back to how people perceive me, so it's a lot more questions than answers so far.
The frustrating thing I find about that, and I'm personally much closer to one end of the spectrum than I am to the other, but the simple fact that so many people, even if they have it within themselves, don't really understand that sexuality isn't black or white. Like
Right.
it's I still, and I've said this for years, I still think that the amount of true straight and true gay people out there is much smaller than we think it is. Just because everything in the world exists on a spectrum, so I feel like there should be a better understanding of people who are, again, somewhere on the spectrum. Speaking as a male, I certainly think there is bi erasure, and I think that yeah, if you're a bi guy, you kind of get it coming and going because
Yeah.
straight people think that you're gay, which you're not,
Right.
and gay people think you're like saying you're bisexual, but you're really gay, which that's kind of been my experience. Yeah,
Even in the community, you feel like you have to defend your honor. I swear to God, like I could just show you pages of Tinder matches because I put bisexual on my profile
right.
just so it lessens that awkward conversation coming up at some point.
Sure.
Just out there and be like, just people like, oh, how do you really know you're bisexual? It's like, why can't you accept that? Like, what do I have to do to prove?
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
how do you even prove that? It's like if you like pancakes, how do you prove you like pancakes?
yeah,
Like you're eating them,
yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's that's
It's still what I have. It's
right.
in me. It's how I feel. I don't know how to manifest that for you. I don't know. So yeah, it's frustrating. You know.
And you can't explain something that isn't linear. Like you can't explain something that works different ways for different people.
Yeah.
Like you just got to be who you are, and that's that.
Yeah. Yeah. And just hopefully you find someone who's understanding and
Yeah.
doesn't give a shit.
Right. And there are plenty of understanding people out there.
Mhm.
What was the coming out? I mean, what was it like to speak to your loved ones? Whether it be like friends or family, and out yourself.
I don't know. It's still ongoing. I'm open about it. I've posted about it, but it's also like I'm at the point where like okay, I had to remember okay who knows and who doesn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like oh, does this person know? Does that person is like I've posted about it? Did they see it? Did they? I don't know. So it's like just trying to remember who the fuck I came out to. All the important people, close friends, family, parents, like that. And so yeah, it started in college again, pushing that stuff down for years. And it finally came to a head. I think in college, like, okay, this is who I am. Then you got to wrap your head around, okay, how do I tell other people? Do I have to tell other people? So I came out to my parents first, and they were good about. They were accepting. It was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and really, there's only been like one person who's been kind of a dick about it. Everyone else has been cool, but at least me, I focused on the one person who didn't accept me and not think about everyone else who's been super cool. So it was just a process. Once I came out to my parents, yeah, I kind of just went down the list. Like I want, siblings to know. I didn't necessarily come out to my grandparents. One of them, I wanted to, but it's a different generation. You don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And they unfortunately passed without me ever telling them. I did tell the one that was the one that I have left. I came out to them over pandemic. just because my grandpa died pre-pandemic, right as everything was shutting down. He broke his leg and had to go in surgery and didn't really come out of surgery. And then I didn't tell him. And then just knowing that I didn't tell him, my grandparents really, weighed on me. And over a pandemic, I came out to my dad's dad. And he was super cool about it, which I feel good about. But yeah, so it was just going down the list of who do I want to know, and then just using the sexuality in my art. That's another way of coming out. So I feel like every day I'm like coming out. So it's like, when's it over? When can I just relax? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about it until just now, but I guess that's something that rears its head with every new person you meet. Kind of, it's like, okay, when do I have to have this discussion?
Yeah, when do I have to play that card?
That's funny.
Band-Aid. Yeah.
So what are you doing for like self-care? Like we've talked about self-care a little bit in between kind of the other stuff, but when Tanner wants to take care of himself, or when he wants to like bring himself down a little bit, or when things are a little too heavy, like what do you do to get yourself back on a level?
Try to step away from social media just because it's ugly and it's consuming.
Smart man.
Yeah, make sure I'm going to therapy. I'm in therapy a couple times a month. Journaling is good. Writing is big for me. Working out, exercising, socializing, seeing friends, playing music is big for me. So those are sort of what my mainstays. So.
And are you one of those musicians that like practices every day?
I'm not the best musician. I'll tell you that right now. I know enough to get what's in my head out on whatever instrument I'm playing. So, well, my records, I do all the parts myself. I just gave it, real blue-hearted kids. That way people thought it was a band, and not just one person doing everything. It's a band now, but it wasn't in the beginning. So I forgot what the question was. I'm sorry.
It was self-care, and then it was kind of like, shit, I forgot what the question was too. Right, yeah. I mean, like my friends who I always feel like I've only
practicing.
Right, yeah.
I don't. Yeah. No, I don't. I write a lot of songs. They say Paul McCartney wakes up with songs in his head. Like that's how he wrote Yesterday. He just changed Scrambled Eggs.
Scrambled Eggs yesterday, yeah.
And that's how I am, which makes me, I guess I'm kind of like Paul McCartney.
You're Paul McCartney. There you go.
Nowhere near his level, but I wake up and do I have time to sit, fuck around on the guitar, figure this out before I have to get ready for work, or, I'll be running like, and so I hear stuff in my head and just I fuck around on the instrument till I get the right chord or whatever I hear in my head. So that's how I write, and I don't really practice because I don't have time and I don't really need to because it's not my livelihood. So I'm not trying to be the biggest, greatest. I want to do well, but that's too many cooks in the kitchen, man. It's got too much shit going on.
Whole lot of shit happening.
Yeah.
I wonder this question for myself sometimes. Is there such a thing as being too busy? Probably. First season of the podcast is done. I'm getting back into comedy. I don't really have anything pressing or do, right? I feel antsy. I'm only happy, like I said earlier, when I'm working on something or creating something, and now I'm kind of like in like this, trying to force myself to take it easy, and it's like, I don't know what to do with my hands. They need to be doing so I think that's a problem. Eventually, I need to learn to separate myself. Busy is how I guess I maintain myself. So learning to be idle and is hard for me. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to be okay with nothing, but it's super hard because I'm like, because for the longest time I didn't do anything, until I was like, I didn't do anything as a teenager. It wasn't until I got out of college I felt like I finally was able to be a person, and I feel like I'm just making up for lost time. Sure.
So that's why I try to be so prolific, but learning to be still is difficult.
I get it. I think I'm in the same boat. When I was a kid, you could put me in front of the TV for 3 hours and I'd be fine. I could stand in front of a record player and play records for hours on end when I was a kid. Now, if I'm going to put on a record, I have to be reading a book, and I have to be checking messages on my phone, and I have to be like cleaning something, and I have to be doing 5 things at the same time. I can't just let my body rest and my mind kind of rest and enjoy music as it is. It's really weird. And I think some of it is cultural, because now we just live in this space where everyone's expected to do 6,300 million things at once.
Yeah.
But I think some of it is also just idle time as a concept freaks me out.
I do a bunch of stuff, but I had to do one thing at a time. Like I'm reading, I have to read. I can't read and listen to something. or I can't write and listen to something. My brain doesn't multitask like that.
Right.
I do, okay, I'll work on music for a couple hours, then I go work on the podcast for a couple hours. I'll write for an hour, I'll read for half an hour. It's a lot, but I can't do it all together. That's just how my brain works. That's not how I roll.
Yeah.
But yeah, but feel like I'm okay, I did this, and this. Good, I can go to bed. I'm good.
Yeah.
Tonight. Yeah.
Is there anything like personally that you feel like you still have to conquer? Like internally, is there anything that you still feel like, man, I gotta figure this out. I gotta make these strides forward in my life. I need to get a handle on this.
Yeah, I would like to. I'd like to get better at asking for help or accepting help when I need help. Take more initiative socially, dating, all that stuff.
Are you? Because I guess because you do music and comedy and these things are so outward facing, do you consider yourself a shy person?
Yeah, absolutely. One-on-one, talking one-on-one with someone is like, I can talk to anyone, but it's like, a little shy. The comedy of the music mask, it's an inflated version of myself. So I still try to be as real as I can, but yeah, I'm definitely, shy. But if people come up and talk to me, I don't feel anxious. I'm just not, I won't initiate it so much. Who I am, I guess.
Sure. Every personalities are different. And I do think a lot of us kind of, when we're doing public facing stuff, have that kind of like, yeah, this is the real me, but it's like an inflated version of me. Like you're able to put that extrovert button on and be kind of a showman version of yourself a little bit.
Yeah, and with each thing that I do, performance-wise, is sort of a different version of myself. Who I am when I'm performing comedy is who I feel like I actually am. The voice that I have, that I'm talking with, that feels like that's actually me. Doing the music is more of a, I sort of say that's like my alter ego. I get to, be the person who I'm not usually am outside of performing music. So different facets of myself. And then when you meet me, I just try to be a nice person. I don't know. So I have different facets of myself depending on what I'm doing. But yeah.
We're multidimensional people. And are you looking forward? I mean, COVID threw this fucking gigantic monkey wrench in the middle of life for most of us, if not all of us. You looking forward to getting back on the road and doing the stuff that you do?
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like a lot of my friends who are comedians and stuff, they really struggled over the pandemic, just because that their whole identity, their whole life is performing, and we couldn't perform. I was lucky to where I was able to work on other things, other projects. It gave me just time to really work on the podcast. That's what you hear on the podcast is my pandemic project.
Right.
So it all happened then, most of it. So I'm lucky to where I can do other things and not have to worry about, if I don't have enough gigs or whatever. But yeah, of course, I miss it. It's a drug when you go up there and it's going great. It's like, this is awesome. So, of course, I want to keep pursuing that. So yeah, it's great. I'm also thankful for the perspective that the last year has given me and hopefully the rest of the world. So
I worry about that, man, because I see things opening up so quickly and I'm like, okay, let's please not forget what has happened from March 12th, 2020 until now. I feel like this moment, the universe wanted us to take some time out and reflect.
For sure. And I think a lot of people aren't. You always hear people, let's go back to normal. It's like, well,
Normal's gone, buddy.
That's not going to happen. Like, does it normal, at least what you think is normal, it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
You can't shut the world down for a year and not be different. That's what I'm, really thinking, okay, what do I really, really want to do? How do I want to start living? How do I want to behave? And I just feel like so many people are like, oh, back to normal, whatever, fuck it, let's go to the beach. And you wasted this time.
Right.
So.
Right. And I've had this last question kind of formulating in my head for a while. What do you think? I guess this is a two-part question. As a man, what do you think prevents guys from being the most authentic version of themselves? Because you are a super authentic person. You deal with some real shit and you're open about it in a world where it's not encouraged to be open and most people are afraid to be open. So what do we need to do for people of all genders or no gender to just kind of stimulate, or maybe stimulate's not the right word, to promote being authentic?
That's a good question. You just have to get to know yourself better and just really learn what makes yourself tick and ask why do I do what I do? Why do I react that way? Why did I do this? Why do that? Introspection is I think overlooked thing in our society. I think a lot of people would benefit from going to therapy, or you don't have to live with a mental health condition to get some sort of benefit from it. I think the more we look in ourselves, the more we try to figure out, again, what makes us tick, then we can start to grow as people. So I think that goes for anybody. And I still have lots of rocks to overturn in my own life, but just willing to do the work and try to figure out why I am the way I am has helped me a lot, and wanting to pursue that even further, just dig it up from the root and go all the way to the beginning.
I want to hold on to that thought for a minute and really stress the importance of finding a therapist. We've talked about therapy in just about every episode of this series so far, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to find an impartial third party that you can speak to on a regular basis about the stuff you're dealing with. And everybody's dealing with stuff. Like, we're all dealing with stuff, particularly having come out, well, I guess we're not all out of the pandemic, and we don't know what the future holds in regards to that. But in one way or another, we've all been through a serious sea change in the past year and a half. And even if we weren't already messed up before that, which many of us, myself included, were and are, I think you still need somebody to talk through everything that's gone on recently with. So, I can't stress enough, find a therapist. If you don't have one, if you're not happy with your current therapist, find another one. If you need resources to find therapists, you can go to psychologytoday.com. You can look on the internet for text or phone services or cost-effective services. You can also look on the website of your insurance provider. You can look on ZocDoc. There are tons of ways you can find therapists. It's really important. I think you should do it. And if you need any support, hit me up. And thank you, Tanner, for being so open and honest about your story. And I wish you the best as a friend, of course. And I really appreciate the time you took to be on this podcast. If you yourself want to find Tanner and the things that he does, you can find the Heavy Head Podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. And you can also follow Tanner on Instagram, either at Heavy Head Pod or at Hinds Comic. Thanks for listening to Detoxicity. The show is hosted and produced by me, Mike Joseph. Calvin Williams wrote and performed the music you hear at the beginning and end of each episode, and Jacob Block designed the logo. The concept of this show was created by me with inspiration from Jeff Giles and Andrew Grossman. If you'd like to reach out to me to offer feedback, recommend a guest, or guest on the show yourself, feel free to reach out to me via socials. I'm DetoxPod Guy on Instagram, Tis Mike Joseph on Twitter. You can also email me, detoxpod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, stay safe and healthy, and take care of yourselves. Till next time, peace.